What's up guys, hope you're having a great week. Sorry these videos are coming out late this week. I've been ill since like Monday or Tuesday, so I've been ready to record this video since like Tuesday, but I've been thinking like every day I won't record it on Tuesday because it won't be very good with my voice sounding like this, and like I'm coughing and stuff. So I was hoping I'll feel better on Wednesday, and then Wednesday came and I wasn't. Hopefully I'll be better on Thursday, and Thursday came and I wasn't. So now we're at Friday and we just gotta do these videos anyway. So they're not gonna be the best, but I have put in just as much time and research to all of these fights that I usually would. So while the presentation might not be as good as usual, the content should hopefully be close to the same. My head is a little bit fuzzy, so I might miss out the odd detail here and there because I'm not thinking as sharp as I usually do. But hopefully next week everything will be back to normal. Like I said, I've put off recording these since Friday because with my voice and the fact that that's going to happen throughout this video a decent amount, my chest is a little bit dodgy, these ain't going to be the best. So we'll get into it. I'm going to take my time as well because my chest is a little bit dodgy, so I am getting out of breath when I talk. So I'm going to take my time, take it real slow. We'll get through these videos, and then hopefully by next week everyone will be back to normal. So we'll start off with Derrick Lewis versus Tallison Teixeira. So if we take a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Charier is the favourite at average odds of about 1.38, and in my fuzzy brain I haven't even got the implied probability calculator up. Here we go. Wow, I didn't mean to click that either. Oh, I'm all over the place, boys. I'm all over the place straight away. Fucking hell, I'm all over the place. I feel dreadful. Right, 1.38, which is going to be minus 263 for an implied probability of 72%. And if we take a look at the odds on Lewis, he's around an average of 3.0, which is going to be plus 200 for an implied probability of 33%. So Lewis is 40 years old, 6'3", with a 79-inch reach, and Teixeira is 25 years old, 6'7", with an 83-inch reach. So this is a very strange fight, this. So we can see there's a massive age gap between the two. It's 15 years, and statistically the younger fighter wins around 70, well over 70% of the time when there's a 15-year age gap in a fight. It's not very often that 40-year-olds beat 25-year-olds. You know, it's a young man's game at the end of the day, and these two fighters are at that sweet spot in their careers where we know Teixeira is going to be improving a lot from fight to fight, or he should be. And we know Lewis at 40 years old is declining, like we're seeing it. So both guys definitely on opposite career trajectories. It's also a bit of a size difference between the two. Like Teixeira is very long and tall and awkward, 6'7" with an 83-inch reach. He's obviously got one of the longest wingspans in the UFC. He might actually have the longest wingspan. Obviously he's got a similar wingspan to Volkov, so it'll probably be between him and Volkov, but he's going to be up there for like one of the longest guys in the UFC for sure. So two big X factors in favour of Teixeira: youth, size, for sure. But the heavyweight weight class is an interesting weight class to have a size difference like this, because we know that fighters tend to develop later in their careers. They mature later in their careers. So 40 years old is definitely old for a heavyweight, but it's not like crazy old. And 25 years old is like super young for a heavyweight. So usually you don't see heavyweights kind of come into a decent level of ability in their careers until they like hit their 30s, like early 30s. So with Teixeira, he is very inexperienced, and if you look at his record, it kind of reflects that. He's had 8 pro fights, and he's won every single one of them in the first round. So while that is good, if you look at the records of the guys that he's been fighting, his record's very padded, right? 0-0, 0-1, 1-1, 4-15, 2-1, 2-1, 6-1, and then he's fought Taffer in his debut. But we know Taffer is a very one-dimensional fighter. And really, what does a 35-second knockout tell us? I could knock anyone out in 35 seconds. It's just doesn't really mean anything. Anyone can be knocked out in 35 seconds under the right set of circumstances on any given night. Do you know what I mean? It's just, it could be just that random things that happen. So 35-second knockout doesn't really tell us a whole lot about anything. So Teixeira, not only is he a bit of an unknown, we don't know a lot about him, we don't know anything about his grappling, we don't know anything about his cardio, we don't know a whole lot about his striking either. He's very inexperienced, and now he's going from a 35-second knockout against Justin Taffer, one fight in the UFC, to main eventing the UFC card against someone that we know is still very dangerous at 40 years old, who's going to come out the gate very, very hard at him. So I always say you've got to let the odds do the work for you, right? And MMA is an interesting kind of sport because it's one of the very few sports, perhaps maybe the only sport, where a lot of the time I don't feel odds are really based on reality. Because if you look at the odds for these two fighters, right? We don't know anything about Teixeira really. We know he's younger than Lewis, we know he's a big old boy, but outside of that we don't really know a whole lot, right? Yet the implied probability in his odds are giving him 72% chance of winning. It's a pretty big percentage, right? And Derrick Lewis, with true legit knockout power, that the type of guy that can KO anyone on earth dead at any time, with multiple limbs on his body, is only being given a 33% chance of winning. So when I see fights like this may sound disrespectful. I don't intend it to be disrespectful, but who you bet in a fight like this is really an IQ test, and it really just comes down to understanding probability. You've really just got to let the odds do the work for you. There's no rationale on earth which justifies a bet on Teixeira at an implied probability of 72%. It just doesn't make any sense. I understand why people wouldn't want to gamble and put their money at risk on Derrick Lewis, a 40-year-old dude, against a fucking giant young Brazilian. I do get that. But there's no justification for betting a guy like Teixeira in this odds range. It's just absurd. It really is an IQ test, and it really just comes down to like understanding probability. Either you understand probability or you don't, and if you understand probability, you know you can't touch this guy. So what we'll do, we'll talk a little bit about how these two match up stylistically. It ain't really that complicated. We can get through it pretty quick, and then we'll kind of summarize this one. I'll let you guys know what I'm doing from a betting point of view, right? So fuck it out. I'm fucking struggling, boys, not gonna lie. These videos are gonna be rough. Fuck me, man. So, how do they match up stylistically? Well, we don't know very much about Teixeira's grappling, right? If you look on his record, he's got some wins on the ground, but we've only really seen him stand and bang. We know Derrick Lewis is very bad on the ground. He's easy to take down. He's quite hard to hold down early. Lewis is one of these guys that when you take him down early in fights, he tends to be able to stand up pretty quick. But if you wear him out a bit, then you can hold him down. But early on, he does tend to be quite difficult to hold down and control. So coming in with a grappling heavy game plan against Lewis usually depends on whether you have better cardio than him and whether you can kind of wear him down, right? So, in terms of how they match up with grappling, we don't know. But Lewis isn't great on the ground, so it's possible Teixeira might have a big advantage there. We don't know, as we haven't really seen any footage of Teixeira's grappling. But we have seen footage of Lewis's grappling this bad. You can also tire him out on the ground quite quick. By quite quick, I mean 6-7 minutes. If you look at the Spivak fight, you can see how quickly Spivak was able to tire him out. It's a submission in 3 minutes, but Lewis was tired out pretty quick. In terms of striking, it's an interesting one because obviously they're both big old motherfuckers, right, who are bound to hit very hard. So this is where the odds are kind of silly, because I don't know in what way you can favour Teixeira in this fight, really. Like, both are big and scary and dangerous and hit very hard. I don't see how you throw a 72% probability on one of them. For me, this is a 50-50 fight, personally. Because if either of these guys gets punched really hard in the face, they're probably going to get knocked out. And both guys have shown they're dangerous, right? If we're just simplifying this fight, that's what it is. But I don't think it's totally unreasonable to favour Lewis in this fight. My theory being, he is battle tested and he's more experienced, so we know he can take a shot. We know he can hang in there for 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds, right? We know his cardio's not terrible, despite his age, despite his size and his appearance. You know, he went 5 rounds against Jailton Almeida a couple fights ago. Cardio didn't look horrific. Got a 3rd round finish against Rodrigo Nascimento, who's, you know, similar sort of age to Teixeira in his last fight. Actually, he's not a 7-year age gap, but what I mean by that is Nascimento's quite a young heavyweight too. So 3rd round finish, like, for me, we don't know anything about Teixeira's cardio. Like, how many heavyweights do we know that after the 1st round look terrible because they gas? Like, Teixeira could be like that. And if you look at his record, none of his fights have lasted long enough for us to know, right? 30 seconds, 24 seconds, 3.5 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 35 seconds. So what happens if Lewis, like, survives the 1st round and drags Teixeira into round 2? He could just have no cardio at all, right? He might be chinny. One thing I will say about guys with this body type, if you look at guys like the history of the heavyweight division, you look at guys who are abnormally long and tall like this guy. 2 dudes spring to mind: Alexander Volkov and Stefan Struve. Now, most of you watching this might be new fans to watching the UFC, so you might not be too familiar with Stefan Struve. You probably will be familiar with Alexander Volkov because he's still active. But basically, like, a shared characteristic of fighters with this body type, and we talk about this all the time, is that they do tend to be a bit chinny. And I think it's just a long old giraffe neck, right? They're very long. So if they eat a clean hard shot, they usually go away. Now, Stefan Struve was chinny throughout his entire career. If we bring up Stefan's Tapology, the skyscraper, 7 foot tall and 84.5-inch reach. He's got that giraffe neck too. But this guy, man, just KOs and KOs and KOs and, you know, KOs and and outside of the fights he got KO'd in, he would also get rocked and wobbled a lot as well. Now, Volkov's a little bit different. He's a little bit of a strange one because Volkov was chinny in his earlier days, but then for whatever reason he became crazy durable. But in the earlier days of his career in Bellator, he was also, like, really chinny, and he's got about the same wingspan of Teixeira. In fact, Teixeira's a bit longer, slightly longer 3-inch reach. But if we look at Volkov's record and we go back to his Bellator days, you can kind of see it. Where are we? Okay. Knocked out by Vitaly Minakov, but You look at these fights from back in the Bellator days, he was like, there's not many knockout losses on his record, but I like remember from watching Bellator back then that similar to Struve, he would like get rocked and wobbled and dropped and knocked down a lot, and because he was facing like these lower level guys in Bellator, he would kind of weather the storm and survive, and then come back into the fight and win. Like, you know, just like those warriors like a Drew Dober that can take loads of damage and then stay alive and then come back and win. Volkov was like that, but earlier in his career, in these Bellator days, these M1 days, he was very chinny. So it's just like a characteristic of these guys that are abnormally long and tall. And obviously, reason why I'm talking about this is we don't really know how tough and durable Teixeira is, because he's made quick work of everyone he's fought. Now, that's great, that's not his fault, but it does leave a bit of an unanswered question over his durability. And now he's going into his second fight in the UFC, first UFC main event against one of the most devastating knockout artists in the history of the sport. Power's the last thing to go. Lewis is old, he's declining, but Power is the last thing to go, man. So these odds are fucking wacky. This one is obviously, you know, someone's going to get knocked out. And I don't think it's unreasonable to favour Lewis like 55 to 60% in this. At worst, I think it's a 50-50 fight. And I think these odds are utterly bananas. Now, obviously, if you bet Derrick Lewis this weekend, you know, and he gets knocked out in 30 seconds, does anything that I've said even matter? You know, you can't phone your landlord up and be like, yo, I placed an incredible bet on Derrick Lewis this past weekend. The bookies are only giving him a 33% chance of winning in the implied probability, which is cuckoo batshit crazy. So I hammered the fuck out of Derrick Lewis. And he got knocked out in 30 seconds, but it was a great bet. Unfortunately, I can't pay my rent now because I've lost all my money, right? It doesn't matter anything I've said, right? If Lewis loses, he loses and you lose money. But if you're looking for a great value bet and very nice plus EV bet this weekend, I don't think you're going to find anything much better than Derrick Lewis. These odds are wacky. These odds are like mental institute, batshit crazy, cuckoo, make no sense odds. But if Lewis gets KO'd in 30 seconds, doesn't fucking matter. But none of us, unfortunately, have a crystal ball. And in a cage fight to the death, someone's going to get knocked out in this fight. But if you're going to bet $1,000 on either one of these boys, I'd much rather be betting $1,000 on Mr. My Balls is Hot to make $2,000 profit than $1,000 on Mr. Teixeira to make about $400. Because let's be real, boys, with the way inflation is and the cost of living these days, $400 don't buy you fucking dick anyway. So YOLO, right? But in all seriousness, don't bet Teixeira. He's literally one of the worst bets I've seen this year. Dog or pass. Take Lewis or nothing. Oh, my breath. So let's take a look at the proper prop bets. Props aren't loading. Props aren't loading, man. What's going on? Props aren't loading. Oh well. They're not working on best fight odds at the moment. How about, I'm just trying to think on the spot. Oh god. Oh, here we go, we're in. Let's just use this for now. I'm actually building my own odds comparison tool, which will be launching soon. You're all going to love it. It's just going to be much better than the other ones. So, let's take a look then. Oh, they've got to put it on different pages, haven't they? Right. Just what's the over-under, man? Oh, no, they are actually on one page. That'll do. Alright, we're good now. We're good. Okay. So, will fight go distance? No. Alright, so can't bet that. Odds are too steep. Method of victory. Lewis by knockout, TKO, disqualification 4.2. In percentage terms, it's only like 25% better than his money line odds. So I wouldn't bother with that. Don't get cute. Just take Lewis straight. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this fight. Let's move on to the next one. Alright, now let's break down the next fight between Gabriel Bonfim and Stephen Thompson. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see again we've got utterly absurd odds. Who fucking set the odds on this fight, and why haven't they like in any way corrected? Whatever, man. Odds on this event are fucking mental. They're crazy. They're actually crazy. Okay. Bonfim. Average odds 1.24. Minus 417 for an implied probability of 81%. 81%. Okay. Whatever you say. Stephen Thompson 4.0 plus 300. 25%. Straight away, same as the Derrick Lewis Teixeira fight, who you bet in this fight is an IQ test. It just comes down to whether you understand probability or not. You cannot bet Bonfim if you claim to be an intelligent life form. It's just the odds are absurd. 80% implied probability. Just foolish. You won't make money long term placing bets like this. So you have to dead Bonfim off. Don't even think of betting him. The odds are stupid. What these odds are basically saying is that Bonfim has got virtually no way to lose, and that just isn't the case here. So Bonfim, 27 years old, 6'1", 72.5-inch reach. Thompson, 42 years old, 6 foot tall, 75-inch reach. So both guys are about the same size, and we can see there's a big age gap. So another 15-year age gap. Not very often you see 15-year age gaps in the UFC, but we've got one in the main and the co-main, which is probably a first. Don't know what the matchmakers are doing, but what a coincidence. So we know, statistically, very unlikely Thompson wins this weekend. Right, his odds reflect that. Younger fighters win around 70% of the time, way more when there's a 15-year age gap in a fight. So Bonfim's going to be making big improvements from fight to fight. Although, to be fair, we're not really seeing him get that much better, but that's a conversation for another day. And Thompson at 42 years old, he's going to be declining. We've seen a bit of decline in him, to be fair. And he's going to continue to decline. On top of that, we haven't seen him since October. So it's a good amount of time for him to have declined even more. So this is a young man's sport. Bonfim will probably win this weekend, but the odds reflect that. And like I say, who you bet in this fight is an IQ test. It just comes down to whether you understand probability or not, because these odds are fucking... These odds are like fucking... They're just stupid. There's a lot of odds that are stupid on this card, which is why I'm confident I'm going to make a good profit live betting this weekend. We got the nice little cheeky uptrend flowing. Now I'm saying, boys, the most impressive profit chart of all time. We'll probably make money again this weekend. And events like this where you've got the crazy odds on a lot of fights are the perfect storm for doing well on live betting. So if you look at a fight like this, right, how do they match up stylistically? So I do think this could be a very tricky fight for Bonfim if it stays standing. He's a little bit stiff. He's a little bit rigid. kind of stands flat-footed and square, doesn't move his head much. Not that mobile. Does have a lot more raw power than Thompson. But we know that Thompson's got good footwork, good movement. And I could see a situation where Thompson kind of dances around Bonfim and jabs him to death and outpoints him. Just because I don't really rate Bonfim striking very high. He hits hard, but technically he's not great. He also slows and gets quite sloppy as fights wear on. Whereas generally speaking, we don't know if this is the case at 42 years old, but Thompson's still able to maintain a relatively decent output and throw a relatively decent volume of strikes for 3 rounds without slowing down too much. So I could see Thompson kind of styling on Bonfim on the feet, if I'm honest with you. Which is one of the reasons why the odds don't make a whole lot of sense to me. Now, obviously, Thompson's biggest weakness throughout his career has been his takedown defense and his ground game. It's bad. It's not super easy to get Thompson down, but not particularly difficult either with some chain wrestling. So this is an interesting one because obviously Bonfim has a huge advantage over Thompson on the ground. And if Bonfim takes Stephen Thompson down, he's going to be able to cause him a lot of problems. Thompson's very weak on the ground, very easy to hold down and control. But Bonfim doesn't really chain wrestle or grapple that hard. And generally, in order to get Thompson down, you do need to chain wrestle, because where he's got that high level kickboxing background, he's really good at reading takedown entries. So he's good at seeing that initial takedown entry come in, and his frontline takedown offense is very good. He's very good at doing all the right things when you immediately shoot on him, and staying upright and keeping balance and getting his back up against the cage and start to use the cage as a base to defend the takedown. He's good at that. Where Thompson's takedown offense falls down is if you kind of keep persisting with the takedowns, keep chain wrestling, how you kind of work through that frontline takedown defense, which Bonfim generally doesn't really do. Doesn't mean he can't do it, and doesn't mean he won't do it. It just means he doesn't usually do it. So this is one of those fights where on the feet, Bonfim's got the power and the youth. Thompson's got the technique, the experience, the footwork, the movement. On the ground, Bonfim's got a huge edge, but he doesn't ever really train wrestle. Thompson's probably got better cardio even at 42 years old. So again, it's an IQ test. You just gotta bet. If you want to bet this fight, just bet Thompson. There's no point in betting Bonfim at all. These odds are absurd. Thompson has passed the victory, and you shouldn't be betting any fighter in this odds range unless they have almost no way to lose. That's not the case here. Thompson's got better cardio, might have better striking too, and Bonfim doesn't usually grapple in the way that would cause Thompson a problem, but doesn't mean he won't this weekend. So look, it's not very often that 42-year-old fighters beat 27-year-old fighters in the UFC. But if you just look at how they match up stylistically, I don't think it's a terrible fight for Thompson. I don't think Bonfim's great. His record's impressive, but when you look at his skills in the octagon, he's bang average to me. And I do feel there's a decent chance that his 17-1 record is perhaps influencing the odds a little bit. Just like Teixeira's 8-0 record is probably influencing the odds on the main event, you know. So yeah, man. Dog or pass. Surprise, surprise. But it is literally common sense. And there's a lot of fights like this on this card. So in terms of the props, Okay. Round betting. I do like over 1.5 rounds a lot at 1.70. Although they're only 1.70 on these two sites, they're much lower on others. 1.5 is not bad actually, which would be about minus 200. That's not bad, man. That's not bad. I do think there's a good chance this fight goes deep, because I don't think Thompson's as dangerous as he used to be. It's been a long time since he knocked anyone out. This was kind of stopped through cumulative damage, right? And it was 2.5 years ago. Before that, the last time he knocked someone out was 9 years ago. So I don't feel Thompson's the most dangerous striker. Bonfim's never been knocked out. Kind of just got tired and gassed and overwhelmed and stopped on the ground and has lost to Dalby. So yeah, the over 1.5 rounds, I like that. So if you look at Thompson's record, it's not very often that his fights do end under 1.5 rounds. You have to kind of go back to again 9 years ago. Every fight over the last 9 years has gone over 1.5 rounds, and you know we can see that Bonfim's last 3 have as well. Thompson's still a tough fucker. Don't get me wrong, he might melt at 42 years old. He might come in and look terrible. But I do quite like the over 1.5 rounds. We'll call it 1.53 as an average there. It's pretty good. Method of victory. If I was going to take round group betting, I would probably go shit odds. Will fight go the distance? I think there's a good chance it'll go the distance if Thompson looks how he has in recent fights. Obviously at 42 years old. Haven't seen him since November. Could have got a lot worse. But he is a bit of a decisionator. Obviously, as he's declined, more of his fights have ended inside the distance. But I think Bonfim's crazy dangerous. So I just let the odds do the work for you on that one. Yes, fight goes distance gives you a much better risk to reward ratio. Props are going to be a bit shit this week without best fight odds working. I'm building my own odds comparison tool though, so fuck them. Going to be a lot better than all the others. So yeah, clearly dog or pass. It's an IQ test. 80% implied probability is absurd. Just take fucking Thompson if you want to bet this fight, but I do like the over 1.5 rounds quite a bit on this one. What's up guys, we're now into the next one, Calvin Kattar versus Steve Garcia. So if we take a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Garcia is the slight favourite at average odds of about 1.70, which is going to be minus 143 for an implied probability of 59%. And if we take a look at the odds on Kattar, he's around an average of 2.18, which is going to be plus 118 for an implied probability of 46%. So Kattar, 37 years old, 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. Garcia, 33 years old, 6 foot tall with a 73-inch reach. So both guys about the same size. And we can see Kada is a bit older, 4 years older, but he is very old for a featherweight. This is also one of those age gaps where it is quite meaningful, right? Because at 37 years old, we know Kada is really old for a featherweight. He should be declining a lot from fight to fight. And I'm not going to say Garcia is in his prime at 33, because that is quite old for a featherweight as well, to be fair. But the rate at which you decline in the featherweight division between the ages of 33 and 37 is stark. So that definitely gives a pretty big edge statistically to Garcia in this fight. We've obviously seen Calvin Kattar move to TriStar to train under Faraz Sahabi, and hasn't worked out for him yet, but he has fought 4 very tough opponents. And obviously did cause Alal some problems in the 3rd round of that fight, after unfortunately being down 2. So, I wouldn't expect there to be any grappling in this fight. Both of them are obviously very bad on the ground. We've both seen them struggle on the ground, and neither of them ever tried to take their opponents down. They both like to stand and bang. So I would very much expect this to be a stand-up fight. And it's an interesting clash of styles, because neither of them like to take a backward step, and they both have very different approaches to striking. So Kattar has a very boxing heavy style, likes to stand behind the high boxing guard, plod forward, and look to pressure you and throw a high volume of strikes. And Garcia just likes to come forward, stand right in front of you, plant his feet, and just play rock'em sock'em robots and just throw these big wide hooks. So from a technical point of view, Kattar's in a different universe to Garcia. Technically, Garcia is a very low level striker, very bad defensively, very reckless, but he does have a lot more raw power than Kattar. Kattar's more of a volume striker. Having said that, straight punches theoretically beat wide punches. So where Garcia has a tendency to kind of stand in front of his opponents and just do this, you probably can't see because the frame is too small, but he throws like wide hooks like this one, you know, wide hooks like this, and he's very exposed down the middle because he's so wide. Right, he's not keeping his hands up high to protect himself. He's not moving his head. Kattar's like this, comes forward, bap, 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 right, straight down the middle, fast, sharp, technical. Often beats big wide shots, but at the same time these big wide shots carry a lot more power. So you've got kind of like the tight technique of Kattar, the fluidity, the speed, the superior defense versus the raw power, the raw aggression of Garcia. He just wants to bang, bro. He just wants to knock you out, right? So that's like the clash of styles. What is interesting about these two is, like I say, neither of them like to take a backward step, so I wouldn't expect this fight to last very long. Because whenever you've got two guys that don't want to take a backward step, neither guy wants a counter strike, they're going to meet head on. Something's got to give. They can't just meet head on, keep clashing for 15 minutes without someone getting knocked out. Someone's going to have to go onto the back foot, counter strike. Now, out of the two, like, I could see cases for like either guy falling into that role. Kattar may think, you know what, I'm levels above this guy when it comes to striking. I'm just going to play the role of Matador, use my superior technique to kind of counter strike and pick him off as he comes forward. And if Kattar did that, I think he'd do really well against Garcia. But Garcia you know, hey mate, Tyson. Garcia might not have the technique, the footwork, the movement to stop Kada from coming forward, because once Kada kind of starts to absorb a few of those big winging combinations, will Kada start to push Garcia onto the back foot, right? Alright, Tyson. So yeah, man, it's an interesting clash of styles. Should be a stand-up fight. Wouldn't expect it to go to a decision. My lean on this fight would be Kada, just because I'll favour the more skilled fighter here. But again, similar to the Teixeira versus Lewis fight, someone's probably going to get knocked out here. Hey, what's up, Mr. Mato? You want to come say hello to the people? Why don't you take over, Brev? Why don't you take over, mate? Fucking struggling with this one, bro. So anyway, I lean Kada because he's just a more technically skilled striker, and I just think Garcia's potentially a bit of a glass cannon. He's raw, he's aggressive, he hits hard, but will Kada's skill be too much for him, right? Like, if I just grab the mouse real quick. If we just grab the mouse real quick and we take a look at Kada's record and you look at his losses, he's never been knocked out, right? He's never been knocked out. He's never been knocked. The Tyson go down, boss. Causing chaos. Come on, brother. Come on then, mate. So he's never been knocked out. If you look at his record, he's only ever lost decisions or been injured, right? If you look at Garcia's record, he's got a lot of quick finishes where he's kind of overwhelmed guys, but he hasn't really like outskilled anyone. Like, he's bum rushed guys and knocked them out, but he hasn't really outskilled anyone. And if you look at Garcia's record, all of his wins are by knockout pretty much, right? Will this be the first time Kada loses by knockout at 37 years old? It's possible. It's going to happen at some point, most likely, but it's not easy to knock Kada out. And typically, the kind of guys that cause Kada a problem are your kind of guys like a Yusuf Zalal, or a Josh Emmett, or a Max Holloway, who can kind of match that technique and kind of dance around him, and they've got very good footwork and very good movement. They can kind of outskill him. I don't personally feel Garcia is that kind of guy. So, is Garcia going to kind of come in and bum rush Kada and knock him out? Maybe. Might happen. Kada's never been knocked out. So, if Garcia doesn't manage to come out and knock the guy out that has never been knocked out, is Garcia skilled enough to like outpoint and outskill Kada over 3 rounds? Probably not. Probably not. Like, we saw how much Zalal was struggling in the 3rd round. Got injured against Allen. Emmett's a tough stylistic matchup. Sterling out grappled Kada, but you ain't gotta worry about that with Garcia, because Garcia is just as bad on the ground. So, logical pick here is Kada. I might bet him, actually. I don't like the idea of betting on a 37-year-old featherweight that's declining, but if we're being brutally honest, all these guys would fucking beat Garcia easily anyway. So, can't really hold the 4-fight losing streak against Kada. He hasn't looked very good, but Garcia wouldn't look very good against them guys either. So, show some compassion. So now let's take a look at the proper Roonies. Alright, total rounds. Obviously, it's dangerous to bet on over 1.5 rounds in a Steven Garcia fight because he does have that kill or be killed style where he just looks to take you out. So whilst I wouldn't bet the under 1.5 rounds. I would go more towards will fight go to a decision? No. I know Kada is a decisionator. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of his last 7 have gone to a decision. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of his last 9 have gone to a decision. But styles make fights. Garcia hasn't been to a decision in 5 years, and the reason why that fight went to a decision is Luis Pena used a grappling heavy game plan to just kind of wet blanket him, which Kada obviously won't do. So we know that both these guys are aggressive. They you know, neither of them will take a backward step. So it makes sense to bet on this not to go to a decision. Actually, I need to keep checking this. So they keep doing some bullshit around this website where they just show the best odds from like the outlier websites. But as you can see on most sites, the odds are a lot worse than 1.57. So sack that off. Don't bet that at like 1.40 or some nonsense. So like those odds are bad, you know. Those odds are real bad. Alright. Alright. Okay. How will the fight end? Knockout a TKO 1.70. That's not bad. Not many betting sites offer it, but anyway, I do think Kada more likely to win, and again, it's just another kind of situation where you can bet on a proven, battle-tested veteran against a mostly unproven guy, because outside of some quick finishes, Garcia hasn't really been dragged into deep water and tested, and he hasn't really beat particularly good opponents either. So it's a big step up in competition for him. But again, guys like Garcia are tricky, right? They come out the gate hard. So with Terence McKinney on the last event against Vyacheslav Borshev, and it's hard to weather the early storm against these guys, but Kata's never been knocked out, so if anyone can do it, it'll be Kada. Alright, now guys, now let's break down the next fight between Morgan Charier and Nate Landwear. So if we take a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Landwear, decent sized underdog at average odds of about 3.0, which is going to be plus 200 for an implied probability of 33%. But that's it, mate. If we look at the odds on Charier, he's around an average of 1.40, which is going to be minus 250 for an implied probability of 71%. So Charier is 29 years old, 5'8", with a 69-inch reach, and Landwear, 37 years old, 5'9", with a 72-inch reach. So obviously big age gap between the two. Let's see, there's an 8-year age gap, and the younger fighter wins. God, the fucking match. Oh, Mato, you okay? What's wrong? What's wrong, Tyson? Come here, boss. So the matchmakers are loving the big age gaps on this fight. I will say that. 15 years, 15 years, 8 years, 10 years, lots of age, big old age gaps. The younger fighter wins close to 70% of the time when there's an 8-year age gap in a fight. And at 37 years old, Landwear will be declining a lot from fight to fight. With Charier, 29 years old, should be making big improvements from fight to fight, although he isn't really. to be fair. So obviously statistically the age is a big factor in this one. It's not very often that 37-year-olds beat 29-year-olds, especially in one of the lighter weight classes like the featherweight division, where, you know, you do tend to decline earlier in your career than the heavier weight classes. So 37 years old is really old for a featherweight. And we are possibly seeing a bit of decline in Landwear, to be fair. I mean, he's taken a lot of damage in his career as well, right? Isn't the best defensively. So this is one of those matchups which is interesting because track meet. Oh, this video's fucking terrible. This is one of those fights where it's interesting because Charier is better than Landwear from a technical perspective everywhere. Like, we know Landwear, he's not great on the ground. We know he's bad defensively. We know he's reckless. And Charier, very high level technically everywhere. He moves well on the feet. He's a very technical striker. Decent MMA grappler as well. Good cardio. So skill for skill, Charier is better than Landwear everywhere. And fundamentally, that's the reason why, you know, he's a decent size favourite, carrying an implied probability of about 71%, right? But what's interesting about these two is GSP did say that fighting was 90% mental, and that obviously implies that fight IQ, strategy, game planning, mentality, toughness, they're a really big deal, and they're often the deciding outcome in fights. And we talk about this every week in the live betting group, right? So often fight IQ, decision making, game planning, strategy is the difference in the outcome of a fight, right? Talk about this all the time. And that makes this fight interesting because in the mental side of the game, you know, the game planning, the strategy, the decision making, that's an area where Charier is particularly weak. Now, I'm not going to say Landwear is great in that area, but he does have a very strong will to win. He is tough as nails, and he is the kind of guy that you have to practically kill in order to finish. Right? So if you look at Charier's record, like a telltale sign of a guy that may have some weaknesses in the mental side of the game is a guy that frequently goes to split or majority decisions, because what that basically says is this is a guy that either struggles to put his stamp on rounds or makes poor decisions which costs him rounds, right? And if you look at Charier's record, split decision here, split, majority, split, split, majority, split, majority. You get the idea. Like, you probably won't find anyone else in the UFC with as many split and majority decisions on their record as Charier. And that says a lot about his mentality. And a lot of the time, you know, he'll be cruising in fights and he'll be looking great, and he'll be out striking his opponents, he'll be out grappling them, and he'll just find ways to, like, make life difficult for himself. Like, he'll take his foot off the gas, or he'll give up a cheap takedown, or, you know, start getting really passive. Whereas you don't have any of them issues with Landwear, right? For all of Landwear's weaknesses, the guy is very aggressive, strong will to win, tough as nails, doesn't like to take a backward step. So this is a really interesting fight because from a technical point of view, there's not a single advantage that Landwear has over Charier. Like, Charier is much better than him everywhere. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, so much better. Like, it's not even like close. Like, Charier is so much more technical on the feet, far better MMA grappler, better cardio, right? Much better defensively. But we do know most fights are not, you know, a high percentage of fights are quite often decided by the mental side of the game, and as you can see from the amount of times that Charier goes to a split majority decision, that's the side of the game where Charier is particularly weak, and a side of the game where Landwear is, you know, a lot stronger. So this is another one of those fights where you just have to let the odds do the work for you. A big weakness with Charier is that he struggles to put his stamp on rounds. It's one of the reasons why he's lost, you know, been involved in so many split and majority decisions in his career. He just struggles to put his stamp on rounds, which can usually get you into trouble against like a hyper aggressive guy like Nate Landwear with really high output, you know what I mean? Because Landwear doesn't have that problem. He's going to come forward, he's going to throw a high volume of strikes, he's going to be mean and nasty and aggressive. And maybe Charier's technique is the deciding factor, and it most likely will be. He's better than Landwear everywhere, you know, he's a lot younger than Landwear. But again, if you look at the odds, in order to get any value at all on Charier, you know, you virtually got to give him no chance of losing. And Charier is just not that kind of guy that you can put that kind of trust in. You know, on the flip side, I don't love a bet on Landwear in this fight either, because he's very bad defensively, he's very old for a featherweight, he's second best to Charier everywhere. So it's not like Landwear has any clear and obvious path to victory other than Charier fucking up again and making this fight much closer than it needed to be. I will say this though, if you are going to be passive and you are going to be tentative and you are going to be, you know, fucking around and struggling to put your stamp on rounds, Landwear is not really the kind of guy you want to do that against, because his output is so high and he's so aggressive. He is the kind of guy that will make you pay for that. You know what I mean? So it's a great fight for live betting. It's the greatest profit chart you'll ever see. Hopefully we can make money live betting this one, make a profit most weeks. So this is a good candidate for a fight which we could be live betting. But yeah, it's clearly dog or pass, boys. Let's take a look at the let's take a look at the props. So it's interesting how it's pretty much in the even money odds range as to whether this fight will go to a decision or not. It's interesting because obviously on one side, Landwear is very bad defensively, takes a lot of damage in fights, but he's also very aggressive, so he initiates exchanges a lot, which is like that perfect storm for finishes. Because like we were saying with Steve Garcia and Calvin Kattar, Like Landwear is kind of cut from the same cloth as those guys. He doesn't like to take a backward step, so when you got two guys that don't want to take a backward step, someone's usually got to give, someone's usually going to get finished. But Charier doesn't really have that killer instinct. He's very technical, but then he might not need the killer instinct to get a finish with how bad defensively Landwear is, you know. So I kind of get why that's in the even money odds range. I don't have a super strong feeling on that. Because of Nate's age and his aggression, how bad defensively he is, my lean would be on the fight not to go to a decision, but I don't feel super passionate about that one. I think most likely outcome is going to be Charier by decision or technical decision. 2.60 plus 160. Although again, we've got to check all this is a terrible website, by the way. I'm building an odds comparison tool which will decimate this and all the competition. I think we're just going to sack props off for this card because this website is rubbish and best fight odds isn't working. So I hope you found that useful. Dog or pass, you want to bet this fight, take Nate. Again, it's an IQ test. No upside in betting Charier at these odds. Alright boys, now let's break down the next fight between Austin Lane and Vitor Patrino. So if we take a look at the odds, we can see that Patrino is one of the biggest favourites on the card, and we got a lot of big favourites on this card, but he's about a 1.15 favourite, which is going to be minus 667 for an implied probability of 87%. And if we take a look at the odds on Austin Lane, almost said Julian Lane, fucking blast from the past. Austin Lane, he's around an average of 5.5, which is going to be plus 450 for an implied probability of 18%. So Lane is 37 years old, 6'6" with an 80-inch reach, and Patrino 27 years old, 6'2" with a 77.5-inch reach. So Lane a bit longer and taller, 10-year age gap, and we know the younger fighter wins around 70% of the time when there's a 10-year age gap in a fight, which is a big statistical advantage for Patrino. Another X factor on this one is that this fight is at heavyweight, and this will be Patrino's first fight at heavyweight, certainly in the UFC. I don't know if he's fought at heavyweight before the UFC, but certainly in the UFC. So I think there's the potential there could be a big size difference between these two. Lane is one of the biggest heavyweights. Patrino is probably going to be one of the smaller, on the smaller side of the scale for heavyweights. So size matters in MMA. Lane's a big old boy. So when you look at the odds on this fight, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's an IQ test. It's not that complicated. When you look at the odds on Patrino, implied probability of 87%. Like, what are you supposed to do with that? In order to get any value on Patrino, you have to cap him at like 90% or better, which you can't do. You know what I mean? You can't do, man. Like, there's not a fighter in the UFC I'd cap Patrino at 90% of beating, if I'm being honest with you. Throw the women's divisions in as well. Like, 90% is just an absurd probability to assign someone of winning in a cage fight to the death. You should be reserving those odds for those like really special, unusual situations where a guy almost literally has no way to lose, and this type of fight ain't that. So you can't even talk about a bet on Patrino. It's pointless. So then the discussion just moves to, like, is it worth betting on Lane, right? Is it worth betting on Lane, you know what I mean? So, end of the day, Lane's quite a low-level guy. He's stiff. He's slow. Cardio's not the best if you offer up some resistance and make him work. Bad defensively. Patrino's more technical everywhere. He is the better MMA grappler. He is the better striker. But a cage fight to the death, both these guys are really big. They both hit really hard. You know, from a betting point of view, should probably just make this quick. If you want to bet this fight, you've just got to take Lane. Like, it's just common sense. I don't even care if you're Patrino's mum or his brother. Like, why would you bet him? It just doesn't make any sense. They're both big. They both hit hard. Yes, Patrino's better everywhere, but it only takes one shot, and you know, an implied probability of 87% is very aggressive, very, very aggressive. Like, these odds are absurd. So it's definitely dog or pass. As much as Lane's not very good, you know, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. If predicting the outcome of MMA fights was as easy as just betting on the more skilled fighter, we'd all be billionaires, because it's very easy to do that. I could train fucking monkeys on how to do that, but ain't that easy. So Lane or pass, it's as simple as that. In terms of how they match up stylistically, obviously we've seen Lane use a lot of grappling, you know, in recent fights, pick up some wins, but Patrino's not easy to take down or hold down. Lane's actually quite weak off his back, so I could see Patrino having success with grappling in this one, because with Patrino having that smaller, more muscular, more compact frame, you know, he's at that height in a better position to kind of shoot them double legs and put Lane on his back, and I could see him scoring some points, beating Lane up from top position and all that stuff. In terms of striking, you know, like I say, Patrino's more technical, he's better defensively, he moves better, hits pretty hard as well. Obviously at light heavyweight, we don't know how that's going to go up to heavyweight, because he's going to be quite small for the division at 6'2". Maybe not, actually, you know, it's not like he's crazy small for a heavyweight, to be fair, but certainly smaller than Lane. You know what I mean? Patrino probably wins, his odds reflect that, but it's like, there's just no upside in betting him on the odds, on the odds. So if we take a look at the props on this one, so obviously with how bad Lane is defensively, very unlikely this goes to a decision. Odds reflect that. Bit of a dead fight for betting, really. Bit of a dead one. So let's move on to the next one. Alright, now let's break down the fight between Tuco Tokos and Junior Taffer. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Taffer is the favourite at average odds of about 1.57, which is going to be minus 175 for an implied probability of 64%. If we take a look at the odds on Tokos, he's around an average of 2.4, which is plus 140 for an implied probability of 42%. So Taffer's 28 years old, 6'3", with a 72-inch reach. I'm not sure about that. Might be wrong. Let me fact check that, because Taffer's body type is quite long. They mixed that up with his brother. Let's just double check, because I would assume his reach would be way longer than that. Says 75 there. Even 75 is short though. Like, for context, if we brought up like a featherweight, for example, like Kata's reach is 72 inches, which is why alarm bells were ringing when it said Taffer, who is long and tall, has the same reach as a featherweight. But even like 75 inches feels short, but we'll say 75-inch reach. We don't know for sure. A little bit of ambiguity over Taffer's reach. It wouldn't surprise me if it was longer than 75. It wouldn't surprise me if with his body type, long and tall, 6'3", it was like 77 to 80 inch reach. I'd be very surprised if he only had a 72 inch reach. But anyway, both guys on paper around about the same size. Fuck me, man. But there's a 7-year age gap in this fight, but in the context of this matchup, I don't think it means very much. This is because, like, Taffer at 28 is very young for heavyweight. He's very raw. He's very green. Whereas Tokos, 35, is not that old for a heavyweight. So both guys are probably getting better from fight to fight. So this is an interesting matchup. I feel both guys have got extreme advantages in areas that their opponent is weak, but not without like caveats and flaws. So on the feet, Taffer is, in the context of like this level of MMA, like when I say certain words, I often get taken out of context, but for this level of MMA, Taffer's quite devastating, because obviously he's kind of mixing it up in most fights with relatively low level heavyweights, and a lot of these low level heavyweights are kind of slow and they're flat footed and they're stuck in the mud, which is exactly what Tokos is. Tokos doesn't really have any power in his hands. He's very flat footed, he's very slow, he's very bad defensively. And while Taffer's very raw and very green, he is very explosive, very athletic, very fast. And so it's very difficult for these slow, low level, stuck in the mud heavyweights like a Tokos to stop that. Because when Taffer comes forward and he lets his hands go and he looks to take him out, they don't really have the power to back him up and get respect in there. And they don't have the athleticism to match his bum rush either. Right? So Taffer presents a lot of problems for guys like Tokos. I'm fucking dead, boys. I feel dreadful. So, obviously, on the feet, Taffer has a huge advantage. Hits very hard, much faster, much more technical than Tokos. He's actually better defensively as well. For, you know, even though he's reckless, Tokos is particularly bad defensively. So Taffer with a huge advantage when it comes to striking. But obviously we know Taffer's biggest weakness is on the ground, right? Doesn't have very good takedown defense. And, you know, what's a little bit unusual with Taffer is he, even though he's like a strong, powerful, athletic guy on the feet, doesn't really translate all that well on the ground, and he is quite physically weak on the ground and quite easy to hold down. In the context of this level of MMA, he's not the easiest guy to get down, but with a bit of chain wrestling, you get on his legs, you will get him down. And what we've also seen with Taffer is that he does have a tendency to like gas in fights, especially if you make him wrestle. Tokos slows a bit in fights for sure, but generally his cardio is pretty good. So that's where we bring it back to what we said at the beginning of the breakdown, where both guys have got extreme advantages in the area that the other is weak. Fuck it, Alice hard. Both guys have got the skills to exploit the other's biggest weakness. Tokos on the ground with Taffer. Taffer certainly on the feet with Tokos. So, the way I look at this one is, for me personally, Taffer is a very tempting bet. The reason being, Taffer's a very tempting bet is every round starts on the feet, right? And Tokos is a sitting duck to the knockout. Now, even though Tokos can take Taffer down and cause him big problems, and that might certainly be how this fight goes, Tokos isn't like a natural wrestler. He's a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none, but his path to victory in this fight just happens to be his grappling. The problem is, early in the fight, I don't think he'll be that easy to take Taffer down. He's big, he's strong, he's athletic, he's got loads of energy, and he's got that killer instinct, so he's going to be like marauding around the octagon looking to take Tokos out. And Tokos doesn't have the striking defense to defend himself against Taffer on the feet early. It's just a sitting duck to the knockout. So very early on in this fight, Tokos is going to have to try and take Taffer down to alleviate the pressure he's under on the feet, or he's going to get knocked out. And we've already said the reasons why it won't be easy for Tokos to take Taffer down early. So most likely outcome for me here is Taffer by first round knockout. Just I don't think Tokos can survive for very long on the feet with someone as aggressive or dangerous as this. Purely because of how bad he is defensively. So, yeah man, Taffer's a very tempting bet. Obviously it's risky because his cardio is bad. Takedown offense, ground game's bad. Do you really want to be betting on a guy at an implied probability of 64% that's, you know, very bad on the ground and has cardio issues? Probably not. But I would be quite surprised if Tokos were to win this. So we'll have a little look at the proper Roonies. Then I need to go and fucking get some oxygen, man. I'm fucking cooked. So let's just have a look at will the fight go decision? No, it probably won't. Most likely outcome, Taffer by knockout. TKO odds are probably too steep. Yeah, not great. So yeah, man, I don't think, you know, Taffer, I'd be surprised if he lost. So yeah, I hope you found that useful. Nice one, guys.